A teacher locks the door, looks Malik dead in the eye, and says, "If you're really as smart as you act, prove it, solve this or fail the semester." The board is covered in symbols, even she can't explain. The class laughs. Phones record. Malik steps forward, silent, but what he writes next makes the whole school erupt. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. South Bronx, New York. The air inside Jefferson High was always just a little too hot, too stale, like the building itself had given up. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead in room 3C, casting a tired glow over the rows of mismatched desks. The old radiator hissed like it was trying to whisper secrets. Students slouched in their seats, doodling in notebooks or scrolling quietly beneath desks. It was third period math, advanced algebra, and the energy in the room was already tense. Mr. Whitaker stood at the front of the classroom, leaning back against his cluttered desk with that same smug smirk he wore every day. A tall, silver-haired man, with tired blue eyes, Whitaker taught like he was performing, sarcasm his favorite prop. He prided himself on tough love, though the love part had long since left, and if you were black or brown and didn't shrink yourself to fit, his love turned into open disdain. Malik Chambers, 14, sat 3 rows back by the window. A wiry kid with sharp eyes, and a habit of finishing things too fast. Assignments, tests, even books. His hoodie was always up, his pen always moving. Malik didn't talk much in class anymore. Not since he noticed that when he did, the teacher didn't really listen, only waited for a reason to cut him down. That morning, Malik had flown through the worksheet in under 10 minutes. He slid it to the edge of his desk, leaned back, and gazed out the window at the faded brick buildings across the street. Somewhere a siren wailed in the distance. His mind drifted to the coding project he'd been working on at home, a self-taught experiment that no one at school ever asked about. "You finish already, Mr. Chambers?" Mr. Whitaker's voice sliced through the room. Malik didn't respond. He just looked at the teacher, then gave a slight nod. Whitaker chuckled. "Of course you did. Gotta show off, huh?" He turned to the whiteboard and began scribbling a long, twisting algebraic equation with deliberately complex notations. He stepped aside and waved the marker like a magic wand. "Why don't you come solve this for us, genius, since you think you're so smart?" A few students snickered. Malik hesitated. He didn't think he was smart. He knew he was smart. But he also knew this wasn't about the math. Whitaker had pulled this trick before. Put a kid on the spot, watch them fumble, then feed off the silence like it proved something. This wasn't a test. It was theater. And Malik was tired of being cast as the fool. Still, slowly, he stood. The classroom fell quieter as Malik made his way to the board. The rhythm of his sneakers against the tile echoed louder than it should have. All eyes tracked him, some with curiosity, others with smirks. A couple of the black girls in the back whispered something to each other. One of them shook her head. Whitaker crossed his arms, eyes gleaming. "Let's see how far you get before you realize you're in over your head." Malik said nothing. He picked up the marker and stared at the equation. It was messy, purposefully confusing. Not just complex, but twisted. Coefficients thrown in just to tangle, decimals meant to distract. Whitaker paced a few steps to the side. "You know, back in my day, you had to earn your seat in this class, not just sign a piece of paper and claim equity. But hey, maybe things are different now. Maybe all it takes is, what do they call it? Oh right, affirmative action." The words dropped like bricks. A couple of students chuckled uneasily. One boy in the back murmured, "Yo, that's wild." Malik's grip tightened on the marker, but he didn't flinch. He didn't speak. "Come on," Whitaker pushed. "You're the future of STEM, right? Let's see the magic." The silence grew heavy. Malik continued staring at the equation, his eyes darting rapidly, solving, not just the math, but the moment. If he walked away, Whitaker would win. If he fought back, he'd be aggressive. If he failed, he'd confirm every bias in the room. And yet here he was, again forced to perform for approval. He didn't need. Seconds ticked by. Then, free, the bell shrieked, signaling the end of class. Students grabbed their bags with relief, scraping chairs and muttering. Whitaker laughed and waved his hand. "Guess we'll never know. Better luck next time, Mr. Chambers." Malik didn't move. He stared one beat longer, then calmly raised his hand to the board. He wrote, one symbol, then another, The solution flowed like a current, clean, confident, deliberate. He didn't just answer the problem. He dismantled it, broke it into parts, exposed the tricks and built it back up. It was the kind of work that didn't just show what he knew, but how he thought. Each line answered a question no one had dared to ask him. The classroom had mostly emptied, but a few students paused near the door. Someone whispered, "Yo." Malik set the marker down and turned to leave, silent as ever. He didn't look at Whitaker, didn't need to. Whitaker stood frozen, eyes fixed on the board. His smirk had vanished. His hands were still crossed, but tighter now, like he needed to hold something in. Behind him, the board glowed with numbers and logic that outpaced his lesson plan by weeks. Malik hadn't just solved it. He'd rewritten it, and he hadn't said a single word. As Malik walked out the door, one of the quietest kids in class, a Latina girl who'd never spoken above a whisper, glanced at the board, then at Whitaker, and said softly, "Guess affirmative action got it right this time." Whitaker's jaw clenched, but Malik never looked back. That night, the house on 42nd Street was quiet except for the rhythmic click of Malik's pencil against the kitchen table. The overhead light flickered once, then steadied, casting a soft glow over pages of advanced calculus problems that weren't even assigned. They weren't part of any school curriculum. Malik had checked out the textbook from the public library down the block 3 weeks ago. It was dense and outdated, but he devoured every page like it was scripture. Across the room, a microwave meal sat untouched. The clock on the stove blinked 12:20. Malik was still in his school clothes, hoodie zipped halfway, eyes locked on a proof he couldn't quite crack. Not yet, but it was coming. He could feel it. The front door creaked open quietly. Tanya Chambers slipped in, shoes in hand, scrub top wrinkled, exhaustion etched into the lines around her eyes. Her overnight shift at Lincoln Hospital had run long. Again, she set her bag down gently, trying not to wake her son. But Malik didn't even flinch. "You're still up?" she asked softly. Malik nodded without looking up. "Almost done." She walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. It lingered, heavy with love and concern. "You know you don't have to solve the universe tonight, right?" "I know." Tanya sighed, pulled out a chair, and sat beside him. "What happened at school today?" He hesitated. "I heard something from Mrs. Park. She said you wrote something crazy on the board in math." Malik finally looked up. His face didn't show pride, just a tight restraint. "He tried to embarrass me, Mr. Whitaker." Malik nodded. Tanya exhaled deeply. She knew that name too well. Too many late-night talks with other black moms in the building. Too many quiet warnings. And I solved it. The whole thing. Without saying a word. She blinked. "You didn't talk back?" "No." A small, tired smile curved on her lips. "That's my boy." But Malik didn't smile back. "Why does it feel like that wasn't enough?" he asked, voice low. Because it wasn't. Malik never really asked about his father anymore, but his presence haunted the apartment in subtle ways. In the bookshelf of thick annotated math journals stacked high in the corner, in the worn leather satchel hidden in the closet, still smelling faintly of chalk and tobacco, in Tanya's occasional silence when Malik showed her a particularly elegant solution, and she would just say, "You got that from him," before walking away to hide her trembling lip. Tobias Chambers had been a PhD candidate at NYU, on track to be the youngest black professor in his department. Brilliant, passionate, a bit too vocal, and too black in a space that didn't know what to do with him. One spring semester, he challenged the university on grading bias after discovering patterns in failed black student exams. Weeks later, he was accused of academic dishonesty, a vague charge that stuck like tar, no evidence. Just whispers. Then a leave of absence. Then nothing. Tanya was pregnant with Malik when Tobias disappeared. She never used the word abandoned, but she never said gone either. It was more like erased. At school, Malik kept to himself, not out of fear, but because he had already learned that talking didn't help. Not when your silence made people nervous. Not when your questions made teachers defensive. He had scored in the 99th percentile on his state math tests. But when recommendations went out for the gifted program, his name never made the list. Jason Kowalski, who sat 2 rows in front of him and couldn't multiply fractions without help, got in without blinking. "Maybe next year," the counselor said, avoiding his mother's eyes. Tanya had smiled politely, but her knuckles were white around her purse strap. From then on, Malik stopped volunteering answers in class. He stopped turning in his extra credit work. He stopped correcting the teacher when they made mistakes. He learned to disappear, until Mr. Whitaker forced him back into the spotlight. The next morning, the hallway buzzed with something different. Students weren't whispering about fights or gossip. They were talking about Malik. Yo, he really solved that. I heard Whitaker ain't even say nothing. Just looked dumb. I saw it. It was wild. Like college math or something. Malik walked slowly through the corridor, hoodie up, eyes forward. Every so often, someone stared at him a beat too long. One kid gave him a half-hearted fist bump. Another girl mouthed respect as he passed. He didn't know how to feel about it. It wasn't admiration. It was curiosity. Suspicion. Like they just realized he wasn't who they thought he was, and weren't sure if they liked it. And then came the label. Smart black kid. Someone muttered near the lockers. Not genius. Not brilliant. Not talented. Just smart black kid. Like a category. Like a quota box checked. Malik hated it. Because he knew what it meant. It meant still black. Still an outsider. Still a surprise. A glitch in their expectations. And it meant Whitaker had said nothing. The board had been wiped clean by the time Malik arrived that morning. No acknowledgement. No correction. No apology. Only silence. Third period came. Malik sat down in room 3C, his face unreadable. Whitaker avoided his eyes. He went through the lesson like nothing had happened. Wrote out another equation. Took volunteers. Joked with the usual students. But he never looked Malik's way. Not once. That silence said everything. It was halfway through fourth period, when the voice came over the intercom. Malik Chambers, please report to the principal's office immediately. Heads turned. A few students oohed. Malik's heart skipped. He glanced at his teacher, who offered no reaction. He rose, slid his notebook into his bag, and walked out. The hallway stretched long and quiet as he headed toward the office. Every step echoed a little louder than the last. His stomach knocked. He hadn't done anything wrong. But in this school, that didn't always matter. He reached the glass door of the main office. The secretary looked up with a polite, strained smile. Go on in. Principal Rawlings is waiting. Malik stepped inside. But it wasn't just Principal Rawlings sitting behind the desk. Next to her in a tailored suit and wire-rimmed glasses, sat a white man Malik didn't recognize holding a printed copy of Malik's math problem from yesterday. And smiling. Malik stood stiff in front of the principal's desk. His hands balled loosely in his hoodie pocket. The stranger beside Principal Rawlings had neatly combed hair, a tight jawline, and that look, the one adults wore when they were pretending they weren't judging you. Principal Rawlings herself wore her usual smile. Too warm, too perfect, like it had been practiced in a mirror. Malik, she said smoothly. Please, have a seat. He lowered himself into the chair across from her, eyes darting to the unfamiliar man. This is Mr. Halperin, Rawlings said. From the district, he oversees curriculum integrity and behavior alignment for advanced programs. Halperin extended a hand. Malik shook it out of reflex. I saw your little performance yesterday, Halperin said, smiling like he was complimenting a dog for balancing a treat. Very impressive, though it raised some concerns. Malik blinked. Concerns? Rawlings leaned forward. We've received reports that you were being intentionally disruptive, that you used the whiteboard to challenge your teacher's authority, in a way that was confrontational. Malik's mouth went dry. I didn't say anything. He called me up. Halperin raised a brow. Sometimes silence can be louder than words. Later that day, Tanya Chambers rushed into the main office with tired eyes and hospital scrubs still on. She sat stiff in the conference room, clutching a folder. I want to be clear, she said, voice steady but simmering. My son isn't defiant. He's gifted. Malik tested with an IQ of 45 in the 3rd grade. I still have the documentation here. She slid the paper across the table. Rawlings picked it up, glanced at it, then set it aside like it was a napkin. Yes, Mrs. Chambers, she said, but IQ doesn't always translate to emotional maturity. Tanya's eyes narrowed. So you're saying his intelligence is a problem now? We're saying it can become a problem, Halperin interjected, when it creates friction with faculty. The classroom has to remain a space of mutual respect, and yesterday some staff felt undermined. Tanya's laugh was sharp. You mean, Mr. Whitaker felt embarrassed a black kid outdid him in front of the class? Silent. Rawlings folded her hands. This isn't about race, Mrs. Chambers. Tanya sat back, exhaled. It always is. Even when you swear it's not. That afternoon, Malik was handed a detention slip. Disruptive conduct, it read in sterile typed font. He was also informed he'd been removed from the school's upcoming math competition team. A decision made in the interest of group cohesion. Too much spotlight on one student can be damaging. Mr. Halperin had explained. We want everyone to feel included. But no one had complained. There was no team yet. The whole thing felt fabricated. The halls whispered differently. He's too smug, always thinking he's better than everybody. But he Googled the answer. He lucky Whitaker ain't flunk him. Even some of the teachers in the lounge chimed in. Kid's brilliant. Sure, one said. But he's got an attitude. Yeah, another added, sipping coffee. Too smart for his own good. Malik didn't argue anymore. He stopped raising his hand. Stopped looking teachers in the eye. He walked through the building like a ghost. There but not seen. The quiet felt safer now, like armor. He began journaling at night. His spiral notebook, hidden under his mattress, filled with fragments. They only praise me when I shut up. Is silence respect or surrender? If I were white, would they call me gifted or arrogant? Each entry bled ink like confession. Not because he hoped someone would read them, but because it was the only space where truth could live without punishment. The final insult came at the end of the week. Malik had been called to return his math textbook. A new policy, they said. Materials rotation. But when he peeked into the classroom later, he saw Jason Kowalski being handed a fresh copy of the exact same book. It wasn't about rotation. It was about removal. Friday night, Malik sat on his bed, knees up, pencil in hand, scrawling another entry. It's not that they don't see me. It's that they don't want to. He stared at the page for a long time. Then his phone buzzed. One new notification. Ticked. Yunlame, iTruth from 3C had posted a 42-second clip. The caption read, Teacher tries to embarrass student. Watch what happens. Oh. South Bronx. Genius. He tapped it. The video started mid-lesson. Grainy but clear. Mr. Whitaker's voice rang out. Come on, show us what you got, genius. It showed Malik walking to the board. Silent. Focused. Then the bell rang. Then every line he wrote. Clean. Confident. The video cut to Whitaker's stunned expression. It ended with the whispered voice. Guess affirmative action got it right this time. Malik stared at the screen. In less than an hour, it had 6,000 views. By midnight, it would hit. By morning, Malik woke up to 312 DMs, 12 interview requests, and a message from someone claiming to be a recruiter from a prestigious private STEM school in Manhattan. By Saturday morning, Malik's phone was on fire. The video had cracked 80,000 views by dawn, and by midday, it was over 200,000. By nightfall, 500,000. The comment section flooded like a river breaking its dam. Every few seconds, new names, new opinions. Bro, this kid's a monster with numbers. Yo, Mr. Whitaker got cooked in 4K. South Bronx just dropped the next Einstein. Why is he even in public school? Each like and repost poured validation into Malik's chest. Something he never got in the classroom. But tucked between the praise were the cracks. Ugly, familiar ones. That he cheated. That board was staged. Let's see him do it again. That he folds under pressure. High IQ? Doesn't mean he won't end up in jail like the rest. Malik scrolled slowly, his face unreadable. Tanya sat beside him on the couch, peering over his shoulder. You don't have to read them all, she said softly. I know, he whispered, but he couldn't stop. Some were worse. One account posted a side-by-side of Malik and mugshots of black teens, with the caption, Give it time. Others flooded his DMs with messages like, You think you're special, huh? Or they'll still call you the N-word behind closed doors. Malik's fame wasn't clean. It was coated in awe and suspicion. By Monday morning, the school couldn't pretend anymore. A local news crew showed up outside the building. Cameras rolling. A few students waved in the background, hoping to get on TV. The video had made it to national Twitter accounts. Celebrities retweeted it. Commentators argued about race, education, and equity. The name Malik Chambers was trending. Inside the school, the walls still whispered, but now they whispered differently. Yo, that's him. That's the kid. Don't look. He might be recording you too. Some students were impressed. Others were annoyed. One girl stared and muttered, He's not that smart. By second period, Principal Rawlings made a morning announcement over the intercom. In light of recent social media attention, we want to acknowledge the exceptional academic talents of our student, Malik Chambers. At Jefferson High, we pride ourselves on nurturing all gifted learners. Malik sat frozen at his desk, eyes fixed on the linoleum floor. The words meant nothing. They didn't mean anything when an hour later he was called into Rawlings's office again. She didn't smile this time. "Malik, we need to talk about the video." His brow furrowed. "I didn't post it. We're aware. But you didn't stop it either." He looked at her, stunned. "You put a teacher in a very uncomfortable position," she continued. "Now this school is under national scrutiny. Our faculty morale is shaken. There are conversations happening at the district level. I didn't do anything wrong. You created a spectacle. I solved the problem you let him humiliate me with." There it was. The crack. Rawlings inhaled. This could have been a teachable moment. But now it's become performance. Performance. That word stuck like glass in his throat. "I thought you wanted me to be exceptional," he muttered. She folded her hands. "We want our students to succeed, but not at the cost of decorum." The next day, Tanya received a call from a withheld number. The voice on the other end was crisp, practiced. "We represent an anonymous educational donor," they said. "We were moved by Malik's story and would like to offer financial support for any academic program he chooses, tutoring, test prep, or even relocation if necessary." Tanya was speechless, but Malik didn't look excited when she told him. "Why anonymous?" he asked. "They said they didn't want to distract from your moment." He nodded. Quiet. Distant. Meanwhile, the classroom dynamics shifted hard. No one called him a troublemaker anymore. Now they called him other things. "Look, it's the algorithm boy. Teacher's pet. Don't talk too loud. He might calculate your GPA." What started as jokes grew sharp. His old friends distanced themselves. At lunch, Malik sat alone. When he passed by a group of classmates, they'd lower their voices and chuckle just loud enough for him to hear. He wasn't one of them anymore. He was something else. Not a peer. A warning. That night, Malik couldn't sleep. He opened his journal again. "They want me loud enough to prove I'm smart, but quiet enough not to embarrass them. They hate that I didn't ask permission to be excellent." He closed the book and stared at the ceiling. The email came the next morning. Subject: invitation to apply, Northbridge STEM Academy. It was sleek, polished. The school's logo gleamed at the top, with a digital signature from the admissions director. "Dear Mr. Chambers, we were extremely impressed by your recent demonstration of academic excellence. Northbridge STEM Academy believes students like you deserve a space where genius is celebrated, not suppressed. We are prepared to offer you a full academic scholarship to join our fall 2025 class pending successful completion of our entrance evaluation. Please see the attached materials to begin your application." Malik's hands trembled. Northbridge was elite. Not just better buildings and better books, but a place where students launched startups before graduation, where professors from MIT guest lectured, where black kids weren't just exceptions, they were the standard. But, he scrolled down. The entrance exam was brutal. 6 hours in person, 3 subjects, no calculators, real-time logic interviews. The test was scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Malik clicked accept invitation. But an hour later, someone slid an anonymous note into his locker. In messy black ink, it read, "You really think they'll let you win twice?" For the next 3 weeks, Malik Chambers disappeared. Not physically. He still walked the halls of Jefferson High, still showed up to class, still sat in the back with his hoodie drawn low. But something in his gaze had shifted. He didn't hear the whispers anymore. He didn't react to the jokes. Not when he had a mission. His mind was miles away, buried in stacks of logic puzzles, algorithm simulations, and linear algebra, so advanced even Mr. Whitaker wouldn't dare to grade it. The entrance exam for Northbridge STEM Academy wasn't just a test. It was a wall. A wall built high, wide, and cold, meant to intimidate anyone who didn't already belong. The questions weren't multiple choice. They were problems that didn't fit into boxes, code challenges that demanded not only intelligence, but creativity, real-world applications written in riddles. And buried between the numbers was the real question. How badly do you want to prove you're not a fluke? Malik wanted it more than sleep, more than air. His journal became filled with not just feelings but formulas. His walls were covered in sticky notes and scribbled equations. Tanya watched him, worried but proud. bringing tea to his desk at midnight, whispering soft reminders to eat. He barely touched his food. One night she stood in the doorway, watching him rewrite a code function for the third time. "You know you were enough, right?" she asked. He didn't look up. Not to them. Back at school, the mood had shifted again. The TikTok fame had fizzled, replaced by something colder, jealous silence. The whispers hadn't stopped. They'd just gotten quieter, heavier. "He's probably gonna transfer. Rich kid's school. He ain't even that smart. Just lucky once. Watch. He'll crash on that test." And Mr. Whitaker, he didn't miss a beat. One afternoon, as Malik entered class, Whitaker raised his voice just enough for the room to catch it. Well, if it isn't our little viral mathematician, let's see how far TikTok genius gets in the real world." A few kids chuckled. Malik paused in the doorway, then walked silently to his seat. Whitaker added, quieter this time, "I hope you're studying for disappointment." It wasn't sarcasm. It was threat disguised as realism. Malik said nothing. Test day arrived like a storm without lightning. Gray, heavy, and cold. The exam was being held at a private campus in Midtown, miles from Malik's neighborhood. Tanya scraped together enough to get him a lift, pressing a crisp shirt into his hands that morning, kissing his forehead with trembling lips. "You don't have to win anything," she said, voice cracking. "Just walk in there and own your mind." Malik nodded, but deep inside he knew this was more than a test. It was the door his father never got to walk through. It was the apology he'd never hear from Mr. Whitaker. It was every desk he'd been denied, every raised eyebrow, every skipped recommendation. He had to win. There was no other option. When he arrived, the contrast hit like ice. Marble floors, glass walls, clean, white silence. Every student in the lobby looked like they belonged on a private school brochure. Polished shoes, monogrammed backpacks, confident laughter that said they had backup plans, and legacy alumni in their corner. Malik walked in wearing the same sneakers from the viral video. He scanned the room. He was the only black student there. The only one without a parent trailing behind whispering tips. The only one whose nerves were wrapped not just in pressure but in history. At check-in, the proctor squinted at his ID, flipped it twice, scanned it again, no smile. "You sure this is your exam center?" the man asked flatly. Malik nodded once. The proctor muttered, stamping his paper. "We'll be watching closely." The test lasted 6 hours. 1 break. 3 subjects. 0 mercy. Malik didn't blink. He tore through the first section, mathematical modeling, with surgical focus. Logic puzzles that looked like Greek myths melted under his pen. The second section was real-world algorithm design, and he coded solutions like he was composing music, typing with speed but never rushing. By the third section, an in-person logic interview, he sat across from 2 adult evaluators in sleek suits, their expressions unreadable. One asked, "How do you know you're not just lucky?" Malik looked him straight in the eye. "Because luck doesn't come with proof," he said, tapping his final answer. They didn't respond, but one of them raised an eyebrow. He finished the entire test 40 minutes before the cutoff. Other students were still erasing, mumbling to themselves. Malik stood, handed in his papers, nodded silently. The proctor stared at the clock. Early. Malik offered a single word. "Finished." As he left the building, the air felt thinner, lighter. But he didn't smile, because he knew the hardest part wasn't behind him. It was still coming. 3 days passed. Then 5. Then 7. No call. No email. Only silence. Until a Thursday morning at Jefferson High, Malik was sitting in homeroom, sketching a new algorithm in the corner of his notebook, when the intercom crackled. "Malik Chambers. Please report to Principal Rawlings's office." He looked up, heart pounding. The hallways were quiet as he walked. His sneakers tapped in slow rhythm, each step heavier than the last. When he reached the office, the secretary gave him a thin, forced smile and pointed toward the glass room. Rawlings was there. So was a sealed envelope on her desk. Thick, embossed, with the Northbridge crest. Malik's breath caught in his throat. He stepped inside. "Please sit, Malik," Rawlings said, her tone unreadable. His eyes locked on the envelope. "That just arrived this morning," she said, almost too casually. "Hand-delivered by courier. No return address." He waited. She didn't hand it to him. Instead, she slid it halfway across the desk, then stopped. "I've reviewed it." Malik blinked. "You opened it?" She didn't answer. "I felt it was important we handle this delicately." she said, as if explaining a fragile package. There's a lot of interest in your situation. His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. What does it say? Rawlings folded her hands. I'm afraid I can't disclose that just yet. His pulse roared in his ears. Why not? He asked. She smiled faintly. These things take time. Malik stared at the sealed envelope, his name printed clean across the front. He wasn't allowed to open it. Not yet. And as he left the office, he noticed something chilling. The envelope was no longer on the desk. It had vanished. It started with silence. Not the kind you notice right away. The kind that creeps in so gradually. It becomes background noise. The envelope had disappeared, and with it Malik's certainty. Days passed. Then a week. Then two. At first he told himself they were just processing. That maybe Northbridge needed time to review hundreds of applicants. That maybe they were figuring out logistics, finalizing details, waiting on signatures. But deep down, he knew. Something was wrong. At home, Tanya was on edge. She called the school's office 3 times in 1 week. Each time she was transferred, placed on hold, or met with vague answers. We're still reviewing materials. There's a delay with the district files. We're just waiting on confirmation from the sending school. Each excuse stacked like bricks. Tanya began writing things down. Names, times, phrases. Malik watched her frustration deepen, her nurse's patience wearing thin. How do you wait for something that already happened? He asked one night. Tanya just shook her head. You don't. You push. That push came from Ms. Ortiz. She was the school counselor who most students ignored. Young, quiet, Latina, and tucked in the back hallway near the boiler room. But she noticed things. Malik didn't know how much she'd seen until she asked to speak with him privately after lunch. He sat in the cracked chair across from her desk, watching her sift through folders with a frown growing deeper by the second. I was following up on your Northbridge application, she said slowly. And something doesn't add up. She turned the monitor toward him. On the screen was a scanned version of his transcript, the one that had been sent out. Where are my test scores? Malik asked, squinting. She looked at him. That's what I'm asking. She clicked open another file. The recommendation letter from Mr. Whitaker. Malik read it once. Then again, his mouth went dry. Malik Chambers is a student of exceptional intelligence, but he often struggles with authority and lacks emotional maturity. He shows promise but needs a highly structured environment to thrive. Malik felt his stomach drop. He said I was disruptive. Ms. Ortiz nodded slowly. It's vague enough to raise red flags, especially at a place like Northbridge. He leaned forward, his voice cracking. I studied for weeks. I passed that test. Why would he do this? She paused, then said something he hadn't expected. I think it was on purpose. That afternoon, Ms. Ortiz marched into the main office with a printed copy of Malik's full academic record, complete with every standardized score, competition certificate, and a glowing alternate letter she'd written months ago, one that no one had asked for but she had drafted anyway, just in case. She placed the files on Rawlings's desk. I believe the documents sent on Malik Chambers's behalf were incomplete and misleading. Rawlings didn't blink. I'm sure it was just a clerical error. Ortiz's eyes narrowed. Convenient clerical error. Whitaker, seated beside her, shrugged. These things happen. We're overworked. Ortiz didn't back down. Not like this. Not twice. Not to the same kid. Rawlings folded her hands calmly. This is all speculation, Miss Ortiz. And if you're accusing faculty of intentional sabotage, you need to be very careful. There it was. The thread under the professionalism. Ortiz stared at them both. No. You need to be careful. She left the office with the file still in hand, and a fire in her chest. Malik sat alone in the stairwell that day, head against the concrete wall, the sounds of distant footsteps echoing above. He couldn't cry. He didn't know how to anymore. Not when betrayal kept rewriting the rules. He'd done everything right. Every late-night equation. Every page of logic. Every breath he held while the world watched him climb. And someone still reached into his future and erased it again. This wasn't about effort. It never had been. That night, Miss Ortiz stayed in her office long after everyone left. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for protocols. She pulled out her personal laptop, opened a fresh email, attached the full file with the real scores, the real letter, the real picture of who Malik Chambers was, and sent it directly to Northbridge STEM Academy's admissions director. No more delays. No more gatekeepers. No more middlemen. She clicked send. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then, ping. A reply landed instantly. Subject: urgent, Malik Chambers application. Dear Miss Ortiz, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Please expect a callback within the hour. Her hands trembled. As Ms. Ortiz stared at the blinking cursor, her phone lit up. Unanian caller. She picked up. A voice said, "Thank you. We've been waiting for someone to tell us the truth." Malik stood in front of the Northbridge STEM Academy's glass-paneled entrance, watching the reflection of himself flicker in the polished door. His reflection looked out of place, not because of what he wore, but because of everything the building seemed to say. Legacy, privilege, access. It was the kind of place that didn't advertise itself. It didn't need to. People who belonged here already knew. He inhaled deeply, adjusted the strap of his backpack, and walked in. The receptionist looked up with polite disinterest and handed him a visitor's badge. "They're ready for you, Mr. Chambers. Conference room B." End of the hall. The hallway was lined with portraits. White men in suits, serious faces frozen in oil paint. Underneath, etched plaques read things like Dr. William Easton, founder of Quantum Core Labs, or Julia D. Hastings, class of '89. Each step Malik took felt like it echoed into someone else's legacy. Conference room B had 5 chairs arranged like a firing squad. 4 men, 1 woman, all white, all waiting. "Mr. Chambers," the woman greeted curtly, extending a hand. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Troe, head of mathematics. This is Dr. Clark from theoretical computer science, Mr. DeMarco from applied engineering, Miss Klein from admissions, and Mr. Stratton, our dean of academic affairs." Malik nodded and shook each hand with steady confidence. "Have a seat," Mr. Stratton said, without warmth. The table was bare, except for a legal pad and a pitcher of water. No smiles. No icebreakers. They didn't want to like him. They wanted to measure him. The questions began clinical, almost mechanical. "What systems did you use to prepare for the algorithmic modeling exam? Can you define the difference between P and NP complexity? How would you optimize data compression in a streaming environment?" Malik didn't flinch. His answers were clear, precise, and unlike most interviewees, they weren't rehearsed. He didn't speak from prep books or parroting what he thought they wanted to hear. He spoke because he understood. At one point, Dr. Clark asked him to demonstrate a proof from memory, a nonlinear differential equation. Malik had taught himself from a dusty library textbook. Malik stood, wrote it out on the whiteboard, and explained every step. When he finished, the room was quiet. Miss Klein scribbled something in her notes. Dr. Troe tilted her head slightly, eyebrows raised, not in doubt, but in surprise. Then the silence broke. From the far end of the table, Mr. Stratton leaned back in his chair. His tone shifted. "Impressive," he said slowly. "But tell me something, Mr. Chambers. What makes you think a kid from the South Bronx can thrive in an environment like this?" Malik didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. He met Stratton's gaze head-on. "Because I already do the work your seniors struggle with." No bravado, just fact. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was stunned. Even Dr. Troe looked up, her pen frozen mid-word. Mr. Stratton sat still for a beat too long, then nodded. "That'll be all for now." Malik left the room without looking back. Outside, Tanya was waiting by the building steps, clutching a paper coffee cup like it was a lifeline. She looked up as he approached, eyes searching his face. "Well?" she asked, breath shallow. He didn't smile. He just whispered, "I gave them no choice." They walked to the bus stop in silence, mother and son framed by a skyline that still didn't feel like it belonged to them. But Malik wasn't thinking about belonging anymore. He was thinking about breaking the pattern. That night the apartment phone rang. It was nearly 9 p.m., and Malik had just sat down to eat. Tanya answered, and her face changed within seconds. "Yes, this is Tanya Chambers. Yes, he's here." She handed Malik the receiver, her hand trembling. He pressed it to his ear. "Hello? Malik, this is Director Elias from Northbridge STEM." His chest tightened. "I'll keep this short," Elias said, his voice brisk but clear. "You left an impression on every single member of that panel, not just with your answers, but with your composure. We're offering you full admission, full scholarship, fall 2025 cohort." Malik closed his eyes. Director Elias continued. "However, there's something we need to clarify." His voice darkened slightly. "We attempted to begin your transfer process this afternoon, But we've hit a delay. Someone at Jefferson High flagged your application for review, claimed there was a pending disciplinary case. That kind of flag halts all transfers until it's resolved. Malik's blood ran cold. A disciplinary case? He repeated. I was under the impression it was resolved months ago, Elias said. But someone resubmitted it today, postmarked and time-stamped just before we sent our acceptance notice. Malik stood frozen in the center of the living room, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. I'll be honest with you, Elias said. I've seen this before. I've dealt with this before. But we need your help pushing this through. How? Get me documentation. Anything proving you've been cleared. I'll escalate from there. Malik's jaw clenched. Someone doesn't want you to leave, Elias said, lowering his voice. And I suggest you find out who. Malik hung up the phone. And just as he turned to tell Tanya, his phone buzzed again, this time a text message from an unknown number. It read, "Careful who you trust. They already erased you once." It started with a comment thread. Anonymous, ugly and fast-moving. Malik barely noticed it at first, just another echo in the noise of his post-viral life. But then came the DMs, then screenshots, then TikToks stitched with captions that had nothing to do with math and everything to do with character. Malik Chambers faked that test. Whitaker's been warning staff about him for months. Y'all don't know the whole story. Kid's got gang ties. South Bronx ain't no Harvard pipeline. Malik stared at the screen as one lie multiplied into dozens. Someone had pulled a blurry image from his old Instagram, him in a hoodie standing with his cousin on a fire escape, and edited the caption "Future Felons of America." Another post claimed he'd been suspended for threatening a teacher. That was false. Every part of it was false. But the truth wasn't going viral. The lies were. The atmosphere at school curdled like milk in the sun. It was slow, then sudden. Students who used to dap him up now nodded stiffly, or looked away entirely. Even the ones who had once cheered his viral moment now walked past like they didn't know him. Hallways that used to buzz with curiosity now buzzed with suspicion. "What's up with him?" Someone murmured as he passed. "I heard he hacked his grades. Don't get too close. He's got anger issues." Malik didn't know who started it, but he was starting to realize who was allowing it. Mr. Whitaker, for one, had begun pulling colleagues aside during breaks. "Just a heads up if you're dealing with Chambers. Keep it strictly academic," he said with practiced neutrality. "He's under review for disciplinary reasons. We've all seen the video, but don't be fooled. There's more going on with that kid." It was never outright slander, just seeds, and every teacher who nodded along helped water them. Then came the summons. Principal Rawlings called Malik in on a Tuesday afternoon. He sat stiffly in the familiar plastic chair across from her desk. Tanya was there too, having rushed from her shift still in scrubs, her ID badge swinging. "We received new information," Rawlings began, folding her hands like she was performing a prayer, "regarding the video that circulated earlier this semester." Malik stared at her. "The video that someone else posted?" Rawlings didn't flinch. "Our concern is whether or not you were involved in orchestrating its release, intentionally damaging the reputation of a faculty member, especially in a viral context. Raises serious ethical questions." Tanya blinked. "Are you serious right now?" Rawlings looked at her, voice calm. "It's a standard inquiry." "No, it's a witch hunt," Tanya snapped. "My son's the one who was humiliated. On your watch, he didn't leak anything. He didn't even speak." Rawlings sighed, her voice silk and steel. "The scholarship committee at Northbridge has requested additional character review materials before finalizing his transfer. Until then, his admission and financial aid will remain pending." Malik didn't speak. He didn't move. But something inside him broke. Again. By the end of the week, he stopped going to the cafeteria. He ate granola bars in the library. He stopped checking his messages. He ignored the voice memos from friends who now sounded more like strangers. "Yo, this is all crazy. You good? People saying you staged that video. I'm just trying to understand." "Malik, why would you lie about the test, bro?" The weight was too much. It was heavier than the equations. The pressure, the interviews. This wasn't a battle of minds anymore. It was a war of perception. A battlefield where truth didn't matter. Only narrative did. And the narrative was being written without him. At home, Tanya tried to hold him together. She brought food, sat by his bed, played jazz softly from her phone, like it might coax him back to life. But Malik barely spoke. He journaled less. He studied less. For the first time in months, he considered quitting the transfer altogether. What's the point? He said one night, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Even if I make it out, they'll just find another reason to drag me back. Tanya didn't argue. She just reached over, gripped his hand tight, and said, then we give them no reasons. We starve their lies. But Malik didn't believe anymore. Not in fairness. Not in systems. Not even in math. Then on a quiet Sunday morning, the apartment phone rang. Tanya answered groggily, expecting another nurse calling in a favor or a wrong number. Instead, the voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and unfamiliar.
Mrs. Chambers, my name is Lydia Rowe. I'm a senior reporter with the New York Times.
Tanya sat up straighter. I'm working on a feature, the woman continued, investigating patterns of racial suppression and institutional silencing in public education, particularly involving academically gifted black students. There was a pause. I believe your son's school has a story it doesn't want told, and I believe your son may be the key to telling it. Tanya covered the receiver, turned to Malik, still curled under the blanket, headphones on. She whispered, Malik, the world's finally listening. What do you want to say? The article dropped at 6:02 a.m. sharp. Bronx genius silenced by his own school. The headline sat bold and unflinching on the front page of the New York Times digital edition, just beneath the masthead. Lydia Rowe didn't pull punches. Her reporting was sharp, sourced, and backed by testimony, documents, and pattern. She laid it all bare. Malik's tampered records, the sabotage masked as oversight, the racial undertones disguised as disciplinary concerns, and the whisper campaign that turned a gifted child into a threat simply for existing too visibly. The story traced every beat of Malik's journey, from his silent brilliance in room 3C, to the viral video that should have been a triumph, to the clerical errors that conveniently blocked his scholarship. Ms. Ortiz had gone on record, so had other students. Even a former teacher, now retired, admitted anonymously that Malik's type of intelligence often made folks uncomfortable. By 9:00 a.m., the article had already been reposted over 100,000 times. By noon, it had a hashtag, Let Malik Learn. Then another. Systemic silence. TikTok flooded with stitch reactions. Twitter turned into a storm of commentary. Black scholars weighed in. So did celebrities, athletes, activists. Everyone had an opinion. And for once, the world was saying what Malik had known all along. That silence isn't always compliance. Sometimes, it's survival. The district scrambled. By day's end, a spokesperson for the Board of Education stood stiffly at a podium outside headquarters, eyes squinting into a sea of cameras. The Department of Education is taking the allegations regarding Mr. Malik Chambers seriously. We are committed to equity, transparency, and providing every student, regardless of background, an equal opportunity to succeed. It was the kind of statement that said a lot, without meaning much. They didn't mention Mr. Whitaker, or the falsified records, or the viral text from Northbridge still pending review. They said Malik's name like it was a headline, not a person. The praise came fast, but so did the poison. By that night, Malik's inbox had transformed into a war zone. Amid the outpouring of support were comments dipped in venom. You're not special. Just another hood kid looking for a handout. Stop whining. Maybe if you weren't such a show-off. One message was just an image, his face photoshopped onto a mugshot. Another included the address of his apartment building. Tanya found that one. She didn't speak. She just shut the laptop and pulled Malik into her arms, holding him like she used to when he was 5 and afraid of thunder. The next morning, she called her supervisor at the hospital. I need time off. Something's come up with my son. The woman didn't argue. Mothers knew. Meanwhile, Ms. Ortiz faced her own fallout. A memo arrived on her desk just before lunch. Subject: formal reprimand, breach of internal confidentiality protocols. It was dressed up in bureaucratic language, but the meaning was clear. She had embarrassed the institution. Her file would now carry a permanent red flag. She wouldn't be considered for promotion. Her input on student evaluations would be reviewed. She read it once, then quietly folded it into her bag. Her face didn't crack, but her hands trembled all day, and not a single administrator spoke to her. Malik stayed mostly indoors. Even after the article, after the cameras showed up, after journalists reached out for interviews, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just another spotlight waiting to burn him alive. Tanya tried to distract him. She cooked his favorite meals, played old jazz records, pulled out baby photos, and told stories about how he once asked for a whiteboard for his 3rd birthday. But Malik didn't laugh. He just asked, "Is it always like this? For us?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Then on a Thursday evening, as the sun dipped behind the scaffolding across the street, Tanya's phone rang again. She answered out of habit, exhaustion in her voice. "This is Tanya." A woman's voice responded, measured, professional, but laced with quiet urgency. "Mrs. Chambers, my name is Corinne Watson. I'm a civil rights attorney. I've been following your son's story, and I believe you have grounds for legal action." Tanya straightened. Legal action against the district. Against the school. Possibly the board. Sabotaging transcripts, tampering with recommendations. Character defamation. This isn't just unethical. It's unlawful. Tanya covered the receiver and whispered to Malik, who sat across the room. His head snapped up. The voice continued. "But I need to be honest with you," Watson said, her tone turning grave. "If you sue, you'll face retaliation. They may deny the scholarship outright. You could lose job opportunities. Your reputation could be dragged, publicly, and they'll try to make you look like the problem." Tanya gripped the phone tighter. "And Malik? He'll be scrutinized harder than ever. The same media that praises him today will ask if he's difficult, if he's weaponizing race. This won't be easy." There was a long silence. Then she added, "But if you win, you don't just change the story, you change the system." Tanya looked at her son across the room. Silent, bruised, brilliant. She asked the question that would decide everything. "Malik, do you want to fight?" He looked her in the eye and whispered, "I have to." The apartment, once a place of warmth and whispered encouragement, had turned into a war zone of silence, not the kind born of anger, but of heavy, anxious disagreement. For the first time, Malik and Tanya stood on opposite sides of the same storm. Malik wanted to fight. Tanya wanted to survive. "You don't know what they'll do to us," she told him over dinner one night. Her voice low, her fork untouched. "This isn't just some article anymore. This is court. They'll dig into everything. My job, your childhood, our bills. You think they care about the truth?" Malik, seated across from her, didn't look up from his plate. "They already dug into everything when they erased me." "You think they stopped?" Her voice cracked. "I just want you safe." "I'm not safe," he said quietly. "I never was." The clatter of silverware against ceramic filled the room. Then nothing. That became their routine. Dinners spent chewing through tension. Mornings exchanged with sighs. Love still lived between them, but it now shared space with fear, thick as the peeling paint on the kitchen walls. In the corner of his bedroom, Malik had built a fortress of evidence. A corkboard held copies of his altered transcripts with color-coded pins. His laptop was filled with recordings, hallway conversations, voice memos, screen grabs of manipulated emails. Every insult, every silence, every time someone called him a little too confident. Miss Ortiz had connected them with a psychologist willing to testify pro bono, an expert in the long-term effects of institutional gaslighting on students of color. She reviewed Malik's journal entries, his performance reports, his video testimony, and said simply, "This isn't new, this is just the first time someone kept receipts." Corinne, their attorney, met with them 3 times a week, piecing the puzzle together with surgical precision. "It's not just about you," she reminded Malik. "It's about the system that thinks it can do this to every kid who looks like you and get away with it." And still, Tanya hesitated. "What if they win?" she asked Corinne one night, hands trembling over a mug of tea. "What if we lose everything?" Corinne didn't sugarcoat it. "You might, but if you stay silent, you've already lost." 2 weeks before the hearing, a package arrived at their apartment. No return address, just an envelope, hand-delivered, with the school district's seal stamped faintly in the corner. Inside was a letter, diplomatic in tone, sanitized, dangerous. It opened with an apology. In recognition of recent misunderstandings and communication errors, the district acknowledges Mr. Chambers' right to pursue a brighter educational future. Then came the offer. Immediate release of all holds on Malik's transfer, full scholarship reinstated.
Access to advanced placement courses at Northbridge expedited.
No court. No lawsuit. All Malik had to do was walk away. Tanya held the letter for nearly 10 minutes before handing it to Malik. Her eyes searched his face for hesitation. But he didn't hesitate. "They want me quiet again," he said flatly. "That's not peace. That's bribery. They're giving you everything," she said, desperation leaking through her voice. "Northbridge. Your future. No threats. No courtroom." He shook his head. "They're giving me silence in a nicer package." The night before the court date, Tanya stood in the living room, staring at an old picture of Malik in 3rd grade, front teeth missing, holding a homemade science fair trophy. His eyes were the same then, bright, sharp, determined. She had worked double shifts for that cardboard volcano project, had driven to 3 different stores to find the right baking soda. She thought about the mothers who never got this far, who buried sons for less, who folded under the weight of an institution that never planned for their children to succeed. She wasn't sure anymore if protecting Malik meant shielding him from the world, or letting him burn through it like a meteor with no apology. Then the phone rang. It was late. Past 11, she almost didn't answer. The voice on the other end was low, almost calm, but unmistakably threatening. "You think this courtroom stunt makes you a hero?" Tanya froze. "You put your son in the spotlight, and the spotlight burns. Don't forget, nurses are replaceable. But sons? You only get one." Click. The line went dead. Tanya stood in the hallway, phone still in hand, breath caught in her throat. And for the first time, she wasn't just afraid for Malik. She was afraid of what would happen if she didn't speak. The line outside the courthouse wrapped around the block. By 8 a.m., the marble steps were crowded with community activists in Black Lives Matter jackets, news vans with antennas reaching skyward, and students from Malik's school, holding signs that read, "Let Malik learn" and "Genius nay sal threat." Reporters paced with microphones, murmuring over notes. Some whispered about the case, others whispered about the boy. Inside, the courtroom buzzed like a theater before curtain call. There were no empty benches. Elders from the neighborhood sat shoulder to shoulder with Ivy League alumni. Teachers who'd never spoken out now came to witness. And in the middle of it all, under the relentless fluorescence of public judgment, sat Malik Chambers, 15 years old, wearing a gray blazer slightly too big. Eyes locked forward. He didn't flinch. Not when the school board's lawyers entered in crisp suits. Not when Principal Rawlings avoided his gaze from across the aisle. And not when Mr. Whitaker appeared, seated behind the defense table, whispering to legal counsel like he hadn't spent the last 6 months engineering a silent collapse. The prosecution presented first. Corinne Watson stood tall, steady, and uncompromising. Her voice sliced through the courtroom, calm but fiery, laying out the timeline, the altered transcripts, the recommendation letter sabotage, the scholarship freeze, and the coordinated smear campaign. "This case is not about misunderstanding," she said. "It is about the weaponization of bureaucracy against brilliance that was never supposed to belong to a black boy from the Bronx." Then came the defense. Their tone was different, polished, passive-aggressive. It was all regretful miscommunication and unfortunate oversights. But when they called Malik's name to the stand, the tone sharpened. The goal was clear: shake the boy. Malik took the stand slowly, his back straight, hands folded. The defense attorney, a lean man with thin glasses and a slick voice, started softly. "Malik, you're very bright. No one is arguing that, but bright students sometimes act out when they're bored, don't they?" Malik didn't blink. "That's not what happened."
The lawyer smiled. "Of course. But you did have a reputation at your school for being, how should I put it, challenging."
Malik raised his chin. "I had a reputation for being quiet. That made certain teachers uncomfortable." The attorney tried again. "You never raised concerns formally. You didn't go through official channels. So how do we know these claims aren't just retrospective bitterness?" Malik calmly opened the folder in front of him. "I documented everything," he said. "Would you like the dates?" He began listing them, one by one. October 13th, denied access to math competition application. November 7th, test returned with my name crossed out in pencil. December 12th, verbal insult in front of classmates. January 3rd, my file was found missing my state exam scores. He continued. The room listened in stunned silence. When he paused, he looked directly at the judge. "I didn't know I'd need evidence just to be believed. So I kept it anyway." Tanya's turn came next. She walked slowly to the stand, each step heavier than the last. In her nurse's uniform, she looked out of place, but only to those who didn't know power when they saw it. She took the oath with trembling hands. Her voice shook at first, brittle and careful, but when the defense tried to reduce her to an emotional parent, something in her spine straightened. "I raised a genius," she said, voice firm now, "and they treated him like a liability. They didn't want excellence, they wanted obedience." Her eyes found Malik across the room. "I used to tell him, stay quiet, stay polite, don't give them a reason. But what I didn't realize was his existence was the reason. The courtroom stilled. When the testimony ended, the judge, a middle-aged woman with soft eyes and a stone face, leaned back, rubbing her temples. I'm going to need time to review the evidence. This court is adjourned until further notice. A collective sigh, half disappointment, half relief, rolled through the courtroom. No ruling, no closure. Outside cameras flashed. Microphones swarmed. Melik didn't speak. He just held Tanya's hand, walking down the courthouse steps through the crowd, like someone twice his age. That night the apartment was too quiet. Tanya reheated leftovers that neither of them touched. Melik retreated into his room, sitting by the window, hoodie over his head, staring at the blinking city lights like they held answers. He had done everything right, told the truth, presented the facts, bared his soul on a witness stand while the world watched. But the system didn't run on truth. It ran on delay, on exhaustion, on waiting for people like him to give up. It was past midnight when he heard it, a soft shock at the front door. The sound of paper sliding against linoleum. Melik crept out of bed, walked barefoot to the door, and opened it cautiously. The hallway was empty. But there, on the floor, lay an envelope, unmarked, no stamp, no name, just one word typed on the front. Melik. He bent down, picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed in bold, "The truth is only the first step. Now what will you do with it?" At the bottom of the page, in small handwritten letters, "Check your locker. Tomorrow. Alone." The school hallway was unusually quiet that morning, thick with anticipation and unease. Word of the court hearing had traveled fast, and Malik's name, once whispered, once doubted, now lingered in conversations like folklore. Some students nodded silently as he passed, unsure if they were offering respect or keeping distance. Others stared like they were waiting for him to break. He didn't give them the satisfaction. Melik walked with his hoodie low, shoulders stiff, each step echoing louder than it should have. When he reached his locker number 189, the one with the chipped corner and loose hinge, he looked left, then right. No one around. He opened it slowly. At the very back, wedged between an old textbook and a forgotten binder, sat another envelope. Cream-colored, unmarked, sealed. His heart thudded once hard. He grabbed it, shoved it deep into his backpack, and didn't open it until he was home, in his room with the door locked. Inside was no note this time, just 2 pieces of paper. The first was a photocopy of a document from 8 years ago, his elementary school psychological and academic evaluation. It detailed his IQ score from the 3rd grade. It listed advanced problem-solving capabilities, social maturity beyond grade level, and an aptitude for abstract logic typically seen in students 5 years older. But in the top right-hand corner was a red stamp that made Melik freeze. Suppressed. Do not forward. His breath caught. In the bottom margin, a typed addendum read, "Student has demonstrated exceptional ability. Recommend limiting exposure to accelerated academic tracks until social integration is reassessed." Melik stared at it. They had known, all along. They had labeled him too smart before he even understood what that meant. They hadn't ignored his potential. They had hidden it. The second page hit even harder. It was an internal memo from the school district's Office of Advanced Learning, dated 2 years ago. It referenced his name directly. Student Melik Chambers, monitored since grade 3 for high cognitive output. Beneath that was a chilling bullet point, flagged as high risk for attitude development. Recommend minimal faculty engagement to avoid stimulation of oppositional traits. Avoid gifted program placement without behavioral containment plan. Melik reread it 3 times, each word a dagger. It wasn't just racism. It was policy. Corinne came to the apartment within the hour. She sat in stunned silence on their living room couch, scanning the pages again and again. Tanya stood behind her, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes wet but burning. "They had this," she whispered. "All these years?" Corinne nodded slowly, her jaw clenched.
"This is beyond negligence. This is intentional academic suppression based on race-coded profiling."
"Can we use it?" Melik asked, voice low. Corinne didn't answer immediately. Then finally, "Not only can we use it, we have to." The next day, Lydia Rowe, the journalist who first broke Melik's story, received the memo, and within hours, the second headline dropped. Exclusive. Leaked memo shows NYC schools flagging black genius for attitude risk. The article was more than a follow-up. It was a grenade. Screenshots of the documents flooded Twitter. Education activists called it a smoking gun. Hashtags erupted, gifted and silenced. Not your risk. Expose the system. Politicians began tweeting. TV pundits demanded resignations. Malik's photo hoodie, stoic face, locker behind him, was now being used on posters for protests. Calls poured into the school district. A petition demanding an independent investigation into racial profiling within NYC public schools crossed 200,000 signatures in a day. Malik's inbox filled with letters from students across the country, some thanking him, others saying, "I think they did this to me too." That night, Corinne called with urgency in her voice. "The judge wants to reconvene. Immediately." Malik sat up. "Why? This new evidence changes everything. This wasn't just about you. It proves systemic intent." Tanya looked at her son, tears streaking silently down her cheek. Malik looked back, face still, heart roaring. All this time, he thought the battle was for a seat at the table. But now he understood. The table was never meant for him. So he'd flip it. As they prepared for the courtroom once again, another envelope arrived, this time hand-delivered to Corinne's office. Inside was a list, 12 names, all students, black and brown, from different boroughs, all marked with the same red stamp, suppressed. And at the top of the page, in handwritten ink, Malik wasn't the only one. He was just the first to fight back. The courtroom felt different this time. There was no pretense of quiet curiosity, just a thick, electric tension in the air, like the whole city was holding its breath. Every seat was taken. Cameras were lined along the back wall. Reporters held notepads as if they were holy texts. This wasn't just about Malik anymore. This was about every student like him, every family that had ever asked too many questions, every gifted child who had learned early that brilliance without obedience was dangerous. The judge entered, face stern, voice steady. "This court has reviewed all submitted documentation, including the newly admitted evidence concerning the suppression of academic evaluations and internal communications from the school district." Her eyes scanned the room, pausing on Malik. "There is no longer a question of whether wrongdoing occurred. It is now only a question of scale." Malik sat perfectly still. Tanya gripped his hand. The judge continued.
This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Malik Chambers.
The silence didn't last. It shattered into applause. Tears welled in Tanya's eyes, falling freely as Malik exhaled, slow and deep, for the first time in what felt like years. The ruling was detailed and uncompromising. Malik would receive full compensatory damages for the academic opportunities denied to him. A formal public apology from the NYC Department of Education was mandated, broadcasted and printed in full. His immediate transfer to Northbridge STEM Academy was to be processed within 24 hours. No more waiting. No more gatekeepers. The judge ordered the creation of an independent oversight board to investigate systemic racial bias in the district's gifted programs. Their first task: review all flagged and suppressed IQ evaluations over the past 15 years. And then, the personal consequences. Mr. Whitaker, the man who once chuckled at Malik's intelligence like it was a party trick, was forced to resign, effective immediately. The district released a carefully worded statement about ethical review and retirement incentives. But the truth was not. Principal Grove, who had smiled through meetings and silently stalled Malik's future, announced her early retirement to pursue new opportunities. Behind closed doors, it was clear she'd been given a choice: step down or be removed. And Ms. Ortiz? She was promoted. Director of Student Advocacy. Her new role came with a full staff, budget authority, and a singular mission: identify and protect kids like Malik before the system could grind them down. Back home, the neighborhood erupted. A local muralist painted Malik's face on the side of a bodega wall, next to the words, "Brilliance is not a threat." People dropped off cupcakes and cards. Teachers from other schools reached out. Northbridge sent him a welcome package, including a handwritten note from the dean. "We're not just proud to have you, we're lucky." But Malik stayed quiet. He smiled, shook hands, said thank you, but something inside remained still, not broken, just watchful. He had learned too much about how fast celebration could turn to suspicion. The night before his departure to Northbridge, Malik sat on the floor of his bedroom, packing in silence. Each book, each notebook, folded shirt, everything placed carefully, methodically. Across the room, Tanya watched him, leaning against the doorframe. "You okay, baby?" He nodded. "You did it." He looked up at her. "We did." She smiled. and for the first time in weeks, it reached her eyes. I wish I could say this was the end, she said quietly. But you and I both know, it's just the beginning. Malik zipped the suitcase shut. That's the part I'm ready for. Then came the knock. Soft, unexpected. Tanya answered, expecting a neighbor, maybe a last-minute visitor. Instead, she returned with a letter. No postage. Hand-delivered. Malik, she said, voice strange. It's for you. He took it cautiously. The envelope was aged, yellowed at the corners, handwriting faded, but familiar. Too familiar. He turned it over. His name, written in a script he hadn't seen in over a decade. He opened it slowly, fingers trembling just once. Inside was a single page. No signature, no return address, just words. I watched from afar, not because I didn't care, but because I knew the world you were entering, and I knew how much it hated boys like us when we refused to shrink. They silenced me when I tried to speak. You found a way to be louder. You've already done more than I ever could. I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I've never stopped watching. If you want to talk, I'm ready now. Malik folded the letter slowly, then looked at Tanya. Mom, it's from him. Her breath caught. From who? He didn't need to answer. She already knew. The letter sat on Malik's desk for 3 days. Untouched, folded perfectly in its envelope like something sacred and dangerous. Every time he reached for it, something in his chest twisted. Not quite anger, not quite curiosity. Something heavier, that unfamiliar feeling of knowing someone owed you answers, but fearing you might not like them when they finally arrived. Tanya said nothing at first. She saw the envelope, saw the way her son hovered near it, orbiting like it had gravity. On the 4th night, she finally spoke.
You don't have to read it again, but you also don't have to carry it like it's a weight.
Malik looked up. I just don't get it, he said. Why now? Why after all this? Tanya sighed, sat beside him, her eyes softer than they had been in weeks. Because maybe he's just as scared of being wrong as you are, of hearing why he left. When Malik finally unfolded the pages again, his hands moved slower this time. Not like he was opening a letter, but like he was uncovering something buried. His father, Tobias Chambers, had written in a meticulous hand, the kind of penmanship that belonged to professors and old-school mathematicians. The tone was formal at first, then cracked open with something more fragile. Malik, I know I don't deserve your time, but I've never stopped giving you mine. I followed every headline, every article. I recognized your mind before they did. He recounted his fall at NYU. The accusations, the academic sabotage masked as plagiarism concerns. How he had questioned the department's racial grading bias after discovering nearly every failing grade had a black name attached to it. How the moment he raised his voice, the institution wrote him out of it. Not fired, not charged, just vanished. He explained that when Tanya got pregnant, he feared his shadow would follow their child. I didn't leave because I didn't want you. I left because I thought my failure would poison your future. I was wrong. You did what I couldn't. You survived the system. Tobias now taught at a small community college in Maryland, tucked far from the spotlight. He hadn't stopped teaching, just stopped fighting. But you brought the fight back. The letter ended simply, I'm here now. If you're willing, I'll wait as long as it takes. Malik didn't sleep that night. He stared at the ceiling, counting the lines in the plaster. His mind spun, not with numbers or logic, but question. Would he even recognize the man? Could you forgive someone for disappearing if the reason they left was trying to protect you? The next morning, Malik sat at the kitchen table, the letter in front of him. Tanya poured coffee, sat across from him, and waited. I want to see him, he said, voice thin but Tanya smiled faintly, pain and relief washing over her all at once. You should. They took the train 2 days later. Malik sat by the window, headphones in, staring out at the blur of stations and streets. Tanya sat beside him, but this time she didn't mother him. She let him be still, let him breathe without questions. Maryland was quieter, warmer. The air felt different, less like concrete, more like the world remembered how to breathe. The campus was modest, brick buildings, wide lawns, students with backpacks laughing in small clusters. It wasn't Northbridge, it wasn't Jefferson, it wasn't built to keep people out. As they approached the mathematics department, Malik's steps slowed. You okay? Tanya asked. He nodded once. Yeah. Then pointed to a glass panel door with a sign that read, Prof. Tobias Chambers, Applied Mathematics. but no one was inside. A student walking by noticed them. He's finishing a lecture in room 108. Down the hall. Malik turned, walked. The hallway was quiet, except for a voice echoing faintly through an open door. Malik reached it and paused, looking in from the threshold. The room was small, maybe 30 seats, half filled. Students scribbled notes. At the front stood a tall man, lean, silver at the temples, but still sharp in posture. His voice was calm, precise, almost soothing. And the key here is substitution of variables. Once you isolate for the unknown, what remains is the symmetry hiding beneath the noise. Malik froze. On the whiteboard behind Tobias was an equation. Long, complex, elegant. Malik knew it immediately. It was the same one Whitaker had thrown at him on day one. The same problem he'd solved in silence while the class laughed and the bell rang. And Tobias? He was halfway through writing it, chalk dust clinging to his fingers. Malik's throat tightened. It wasn't just math. It was memory. It was blood. Tobias turned to erase the board, and saw him, Malik, standing at the door, watching. And for a split second, both of them froze. Like a formula was finally about to balance itself out. The halls of Northbridge STEM Academy were a world apart from Jefferson High, but Malik adjusted like he'd always belonged. Not because he felt entitled, but because, after everything, he finally knew he did. There were no smirks when he spoke, no raised eyebrows when he answered too quickly. His silence was seen as focus, not defiance. His questions sparked conversation, not defensiveness. He didn't have to shrink. He soared. Within his first semester, Malik was tutoring upperclassmen in differential equations. He joined the AI Research Club, coded a real-time data equity app for classroom tracking, and won the school's annual Logic Olympiad without breaking a sweat. But what caught the school by surprise wasn't his mind. It was his mission. Because while other students competed, Malik remembered. He remembered the names on the list. The 12 other students flagged and suppressed just like him. He hadn't let that envelope disappear into a drawer. Instead, he launched Let Them Learn, a digital platform and mentorship hub for gifted Black and brown students across the country. With help from Ortiz, Corinne, and even Lydia Rowe, Malik designed a toolkit for students and parents to track academic records, advocate for fair evaluations, and connect with mentors in real time. What started as a blog exploded into a movement. Within months, he was speaking on virtual panels, guesting on education podcasts, and advising advocacy groups on policy reform. School boards from LA to Atlanta requested his insight. The Department of Education formed a racial equity commission, citing Malik's testimony directly in their opening charter. His name, once a whisper of controversy, now echoed through auditoriums as a symbol of resistance. And not just for what he endured, but for how he rose anyway. But it wasn't about revenge. Not for Malik. His goal was never to tear it all down. It was to rebuild what the system refused to see. Brilliance in kids who didn't come from privilege, who didn't look the part, who didn't wait for permission to be excellent. One evening after a panel discussion at Columbia, Malik sat with his father outside a quiet cafe. Tobias watched him talk about algorithms and outreach like he was seeing a younger version of himself, one who hadn't yet been broken. "You're doing what I should have done," Tobias said. Malik didn't respond right away. Then quietly, "No, I'm doing what you taught me, even when you weren't there." They sat in silence, nothing left to prove, only something to heal. Months later, Malik received a letter in the mail. The return address made his eyebrows lift. Jefferson High School. Inside was a handwritten note from the new principal, a young Black woman named Miss Brenton, thanking Malik for changing the narrative and inviting him to return as a guest lecturer for the incoming freshman class. "We want them to see what's possible," she wrote. "We want them to know your name not as a cautionary tale, but as a torch." Malik read it 3 times. Then he said yes. The building looked smaller now, the stairwells less intimidating, the ceiling tiles still flickered, the paint still peeled in corners. But there was something new. On the outer brick wall of Jefferson High, facing the street, was a massive mural. Malik's face rendered in bold color, surrounded by equations. Above him, in giant letters, "Let Them Learn." Below it in smaller print, "Inspired by Malik Chambers. Class of Power." He stood in front of it, hoodie up, eyes damp, until someone tapped his shoulder. "You ready?" He nodded. Room 3C hadn't changed much. Same desks, same walls, same whiteboard stained from years of ghostwriting. But now the seats were filled with students who had been told his story before he arrived. Some leaned forward with curiosity. Some just stared. But no one looked through him. At the front of the room, Malik adjusted the collar of his blazer. He took a deep breath and began. He told them the truth, not just the story, but the fight behind it. The silence, the strategy, the scars that don't fade, even when you win. He spoke not as someone who had escaped, but as someone who refused to leave without leaving the door open behind him. And then, near the end, he paused. Behind him on the whiteboard, still barely visible beneath layers of marker and erasure, was an old quote, Whitaker's favorite, "Solve it, since you think you're so smart." Malik stared at it for a long moment, then walked to the board, picked up the eraser, and wiped the words away. In their place he wrote slowly, cleanly, with the same confidence he once held back like a secret. Genius doesn't need permission. He stepped back, and the room went silent.
Not out of confusion,
But reverent, a silence he had once feared, now entirely his. No child should have to fight this hard, just to be seen. If you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or told to shrink, you already know what Malik felt. Type yes if you believe brilliance deserves more than bias. Subscribe if this broke your heart.